Hey guys, this is James C. Carnib and welcome to this video. I'm planning on doing kind of like this new video series where I'm going to be redesigning the same graphics that NBA, MLS, NHL, MLB, NFL, other professional sports teams post, and I'm going to show you guys kind of how to emulate those elements, those aspects of those designs, and kind of just walk you guys through it. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to emulate what the Los Angeles Lakers posted on June 22nd, 2020. They were a pair of Danny Green mobile wallpapers, but today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this type of graphic. So I'm going to show you guys how to add that kind of film grain, that noise in there, how to add that distressed look of that faded out, washed out color, how to add this little lens flare light effect, and even how to get a sports logo, make it black, add it in here, how to make the transparent aspects, everything. So we're gonna make this pretty much through and through. We're gonna redo it, but instead, to spice it up, I'm gonna be using an NFL team instead. So it's the Lakers. I'm gonna be using Aaron Donald from the LA Rams. So first step, open up Photoshop, make a mobile wallpaper size file. I normally use the iPhone X proportions or ratio, but if you want the exact same size as the image, you can go on Twitter, download it from their Twitter, and once you download it, right click, open with Photoshop, and Photoshop will literally open in the same specs and everything as that. So here in my file, I'm just going to drag it in, or if you opened it with Photoshop, you have it there already. First thing I'm going to do is just the background. I'm going to pick the same color gray as the background. So I'm going to click solid color and then just use the color drop tool, make it that gray, and that's it. Second thing I'm going to do is make the square section or this rectangular section in the middle of the wallpaper. So what I normally like to do, you can honestly just use the marquee tool and draw a rectangle like that and try to line it up, but I like, just to make sure I'm precise, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, draw the rectangle the same size, and then I'm going to use the Pathfinder tools. I'm going to click the three dots and then align to canvas and then center it, just to make sure that I really do have it in the center of the artboard. Then I'm going to make a group, hold Control, click the thumbnail or select the layer so that way I can actually select the layer in Photoshop, and then make sure I have the group selected and click Add Layer Mask button, just so I can have a layer mask in there. Now that I have that section, I'm going to go back in the folder and into my assets and drag whatever picture I want. So I'm going to use this picture of Aaron Donald. So I'm going to make sure I put it inside the folder or inside that group. Size it like that. Let's see. Perfect. So I'm going to have it like that. And then I'm just going to delete that rectangle under, because I just don't need that. So now I have that first step, putting that middle part inside the wallpaper. Now what I'm going to do is play around with the effects on the actual image. So I'm going to select the layer and put filter, camera raw filter. So right now I'm only going to use the basic tools inside the camera raw filter. In the newest version of Photoshop, which just updated about a week before this video, they added all these new tools. Before it was just these. So right now I'm only going to use this basics part for this tutorial, and what I'm going to do is pretty much emulate the look of the design. So I'm just going to show the design here, and I'm going to drag it to one side of the screen just so that I could look at both references while I'm actually editing it. Perfect. All right. So what I'm going to do is play around with all these values. So essentially what I want is a picture that's kind of unsaturated, has a little bit of texture, but mind you, texture, we're going to add a little bit more later on, but we are going to add a little bit now. And I don't want too much contrast, and a main part of really getting, a little trick of really getting this used old vintage Polaroid look is to up the shadows and blacks in the image. That really makes a difference in the image. That really gives you that old look. So let's do that. I'm gonna pretty much bring up the exposure a little bit because I want it to be, I want it to be a little bit brighter. I want it to be a little bit washed out. But with contrast, you see if I raise the contrast, it's gonna make it darker. So I'm gonna drop it down to maybe about -15. And with the highlights and shadows, I'm gonna play around with the highlights, but you don't want to have it too bright either or too dark. So I'm just gonna play around with it and kind of, you could just play around with that depending on your image. But the shadows, I'm definitely going to make it positive. So I'm gonna put it around maybe 15. And I'm gonna do pretty much the same thing with the whites and the blacks. With the whites, I'm gonna play around with the image just pretty much to wherever I feel most comfortable with it. And then with the black, I'm definitely gonna make it positive and bring it out. So maybe with the black, I'm gonna add in more and I'll put it to about 50. Now the next section is texture, clarity, and dehaze. These are all detail-oriented tools with texture. You see, you'll really get that grain, but trust me, it's not as high quality as you think. So I'm not gonna use it too much. I'm just gonna maybe add a little bit just to have a little bit of that effect in it. With clarity and dehaze, I'm also going to do I'm probably only going to do about 10 in both also, because I'm just going to use that to add that little bit of sharpness and that little bit of detail to the image. But we're not going to use it too much, especially with dehaze. If you go all the way, it's kind of like contrast, where it'll pretty much max it out, wash it out all the way, or really make it kind of saturated and colorful. So we're not going to play around too much with it. Now, with this last section, saturation is very important because it's going to get you that main look of overall washing out. But with the original image, you still see a good amount of the purple. So what I'm going to do is bring up the vibrance to about maybe, I think 25 is good, just to make sure that color's popping, and that way when I put down the saturation, it's not going to hurt the colors as much. It's still going to be a nice design, but it's still, you see how you can still have the colors when you put 0 there, they're kind of washed out. That 25 really adds a little bit more tint in the blue. So with the saturation, depending on your image, you could bring it up or down. I'm going to put it at -30, and I'm pretty satisfied with that right there. To have that nice washed out look. So if you notice already, just with that camera raw filter and playing with those settings, it makes a big difference in the image. So now I have that already edited with the camera raw filter. One last thing I want to do, just to tie up all the shades of the colors and everything, is use a color lookup. I normally use this to finalize a whole entire design, but I'm going to use it in this case for the specific section, because since the whole image isn't, or since the whole graphic isn't image heavy, it's a plain color. It's really the only details in this middle section. I'm going to use it on here. And what I'm going to use is 2-strip look. Put it on overlay and drop it down to about 30 opacity. And with that, it really ties in the colors, brings the blues out a little bit more. And it's just it with color lookup. It's a great tool no matter which one you use, depending on the look you're looking for. It's great to kind of just even out all the tones in the image, make it really unified, and kind of like put your design together. So I'm just putting that on there, and then just in case, I'm gonna clip it on. So I'm holding Alt, putting it between the layer, and clipping it to the bottom. They're clipping it to the image. Now with that, I actually think I'm gonna bring up the exposure a little bit more, just because the effect of the color lookup. There. Alright, so we have the middle section done. Next part I'm going to do is this cutout. Now, I noticed in the image, it's obviously not the same picture, but I'm going to be using the same picture for this example. So what I'm going to do is go back to the group, get the layer of the image of the player that I want, Control J to duplicate. I'm gonna move it outside of the group, and then I'm pretty much just going to apply a mask to it. So I'm going to use the quick selection tool. I'm not going to use the pen tool or any really finite way of masking, because it's going to be pretty accurate with this. As long as you're just really paying attention with the brush and looking at the edges, you're not going to have that much of a problem. But in the description, I'll put a link in the description of my video that I made about masking. It's going to be the perfect tool. I'm going to use the same method in this video right now, but I'm not going to go too in depth in it. But you can check that out, give it a view, and let me know what you guys think. It's amazing for getting some really sharp cuts. So right now I'm just using the quick selection tool. We're going to pretty much just cut out the top portion of it, because we want it to be a little abstract, just how the original design is, because it just has a little portion of that basketball. So what I'm going to do is, you know, I'm obviously selecting a lot more than I need to, because I'm only going to use the top section of the helmet, but it's good to, you know, just work with a good amount of space. Perfect. So I messed around with the selected mask options. I made the mask. Now I'm going to move it up here, but first I need to make a selection. So you see how you have the hard cut here in the basketball? What I'm going to do is do the same thing as I did before with the middle section. Create a group, but I'm going to make a selection with the marquee tool first. And I'm going to make it about, I don't want it too high up like that one. I'm going to make it a little bit closer, so I'm going to put it to right about here. And then apply mask, drag the layer in there. Perfect. I'm going to have it just like that. So this is what we have so far. The next thing we're going to do is that little Polaroid flash reflection light effect. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this effect, whether you brush it in yourself, or you look up an asset on Google, or you have an asset of a picture you have for yourself. What I did is that I just looked up on Google, and I looked up Polaroid flash. Actually, no, I looked up Polaroid light effect overlay. And I normally do go to tool size large just to make sure I get a high definition image. And this was the original image I used. I'm gonna put the link in the description for you guys to download the same one. But once you download it, just drag it in, and before you increase the size and you really place it, one thing you should do is really look at the design. So here it has a very sharp cut on the top and right side. So I'm gonna make sure that I put it so that I have it with with those sharp cuts like that. So I'm just gonna flip this. And I'm gonna try to align it. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna flip it back because I'm going to use the screen blend mode. So you can play around with the blend modes depending on what kind of look you want. Screen is really good if you have black on the image, but you can play around with all of them. I'm just gonna use screen for right now. I'm gonna match up the size. Perfect. Now what I'm gonna do is first do the hard cuts on the side. So I'm gonna put it to right about there. Actually, I'm gonna put the mask first and then do the cut. And then I'll brush it in with black so that way it's hidden from the mask. I'm gonna do Control D to deselect. And then I'm going to, with the brush tool on the mask, put the hardness all the way down and pretty much just brush on the side here. See, so I'm gonna look at my actual design so I can reference back to it. And I'm gonna kinda, yeah. I don't want it to be too long. Well, that actually looks good like that, yeah. Perfect. So if you like the color of your reflection, perfect. I'm gonna make I want mine's a little bit more goldish, a little bit more orange. So I'm gonna do the same thing I did with the previous image. Click the layer, filter, camera raw filter. But this time I'm going to use the temperature tool so I can bring it up because I want a little bit more orange. So I'm just gonna bring up the temperature a little bit. But I'm also going to use color mixer. Now I'm going to make the yellow, and I'm going to bring down the hue so that way it gets a little bit more orange, a little bit more saturated, and I'm going to bring down the luminous to make it a little bit darker. So you can feel free to play around with these like little tools here with the color mixer. These are really good, especially to get the right tone that you want. Perfect. So I'm good with that. I want it to be like that goldish. Now the next thing we're going to do is this transparent asset. You can also go on Google and download, you could Google transparent image. And Google has a ton of them. What I personally did is that I made my own on Adobe Illustrator. And I just created a canvas on Adobe Illustrator, 1920 pixels by 1920 pixels. And I literally just made the pattern. Oh, well that quit. There you go. And I literally just made the pattern myself. And then I exported it as a PNG, 300 ppi to make sure it was high quality. So that was my own personal preference. You guys could also download it from Google or just make your own. But regardless, I'm gonna put a link in the description, and you guys, if you want, you guys could download this for yourself. So in the design, I'm gonna go back, drag in the transparent, and what I'm gonna do is that I'm actually gonna try to, since we're actually emulating this, I'm just gonna try to make it around the same size. And then I'm going to make a mask, but just make sure that you will go along the lines of the actual square. So I'm gonna go right about here. I'm gonna use the arrow keys to make sure I get it right on the right pixel. Apply the mask. Then I'm going to just copy the layer. Bring it down. So it's actually offset by 1 pixel. So I'm going to unlink these. Actually, I'm going to unlink the original one from the mask and move it over 1. There you go. I'm going to line that up. Perfect. Alright, so now I'm going to bring up my subject over that, hide the original design. There you go. So this is what we have so far. We're almost wrapping it up. So now all we have left is to add the typography and the logo at the top. So first let's do the logo. So what I always do is that I go on Google and I'll Google whatever team I want for their sports logo. So I'll go LA Rams sports logo. And I always get it from sportslogos.net. So what I did is that I downloaded the logo and dragged it into Illustrator and pretty much made a grayscale type of version out of it. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. I just drag it in. Once it's here, go to image trace. You can do black and white logo, but it's going to be hard depending on how many colors there are. You're really going to only use black and white logo if you're sticking with two solid colors in the original picture. So what I do is I'm going to do 3 colors. Expand, and then Control-Shift-G, or you could just right click and put ungroup. I'm going to delete all the white part and then make this part kind of like an off black, and then the LA a darker off black, not pure black, but dark, kind of like an off black like that. That's normally what I do. I'll normally download the picture and I'll drag it into Illustrator and make it an actual vector smart object just to make sure I have the highest quality. So I'm going to drag it in here. Actually, you know what? Let's go back to Illustrator and then do the same thing, but for this little tiny kind of quote symbol. So we're going to go back in Illustrator, drag in the original design, and I'm going to click crop up here. You don't have to crop it, but I normally crop it just to get rid of all the distraction part. And what I'm going to do is actually outline it with the pen tool. Now, one good trick is not to curve the actual pen. You know, don't actually try to mimic the actual turn or the actual corner. Do straight 90-degree turns, and then with the direct selection tool, you'll be able to modify those values of the corners. So I'm just going to do straight 90-degree angle turns, corners. I'm going to change the fill and stroke. Let's make it thicker to match the original. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do on Illustrator is press A or select this white arrow, which is the direct selection tool. And with these little circles next to the corners, I'm going to drag them in and out. But if you see how I drag this and it affects all of them, we don't want that. We're going to do them individually. So we're going to click the corner by itself, and then now it'll only affect that one corner. So I'm going to do it to move it around here. And you can also use a value up here where it says corner. So I'm gonna make it an even 30 for this. And this one is about the same turn, same corner. Just want to put 30. Now these were smaller, so on this one I'm gonna put maybe 15, and this one I'm gonna put about 10. Perfect. So now that I have that done, I'm going to align the logo and that new quote line. All right. Let's see. Let's make that the darker black. Perfect. All right. So now I'm going to select it and drag it into Photoshop. I'm just going to place it right in the middle at the top. Perfect. Canvas, middle. Perfect. So now we only have pretty much two things left: the typography with those rectangles, and then the overlay effects. So first, let's do the typography. Now, let's do these little rectangles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the top layer because I'm only going to work above everything first just to make everything organized. And I'm going to choose the size of the rectangle I want to do. So I'm just going to mimic this right there. Now a trick to, instead of pretty much methodically or meticulously going in and Control J or holding Alt and dragging and putting it, making sure it's okay 50 and then going back 50, what I do is that I'll just select those three, Alt, and then move them. I'll just kind of match them up. I won't really try to line them up. I'll rely on the Pathfinder tools for that. So I'm going to show you guys that now. So once you have them all lined up, they don't have to be aligned, but once you have them all out, you're going to select all the rectangle layers, and first in the top of the toolbar with the Pathfinder tool, you're going to align to selection, and you're going to align vertical centers. Once you do that, you're going to go down to the third tab of distribute spacing and distribute horizontally, and that'll automatically evenly distribute the space in between all of them. After that, I'm going to press Control G. Actually, I'm going to go back to the layers, select them all again, Control G just to have them all together, and name that rectangles. And I'm going to do a color overlay because I want them to be kind of like an off black. Perfect. That looks good. All right. So now the next part is to pretty much find a sans serif type of font that is going to pretty much emulate this type of look. I decided to use Ambroise because it was pretty much it was a really nice font, but the only advice I have is to make sure you find a similar font and to make sure that it has some thicker weights, because we are going to do an outline for it. So I'm just going to type in the number 99, make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to play with the values here in the character panel with the tracking and everything. Is this the most? Let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to make it extra bold. Perfect. I'm going to put it right over his jersey. And now what I'm going to do is first go to the opacity and fill, and I'm only going to change the fill and drag that all the way to 0. And with the layer selected, I'm going to go to Effects, Stroke, and then add a white stroke over. So I'm actually going to stay at 5 right there. That's a good value. So you know what, maybe I'm going to put it at 8. Nope. You know what, no. I'm putting it back at 5. Perfect. And then now I'm going to type in his name here the same way in the original design for Danny Green, Aaron Donald. So I'm going to make it that same off black. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner in weight. So same thing, play around with the size of it. The tracking, I'm going to make it more spaced out because in the original, it has a little bit more tracking. Perfect. Now that the design is basically done, we have two main design elements or effects that we're going to want to put over it, over this design. First thing is the grain, kind of like that noisy grain effect. And the second thing are these little distress marks, these little tiny burnt holes, plastic holes. It's kind of grungy, or kind of plastic wrappy. So the first thing we're gonna do is the film grain. What I always do is that I actually have an asset for film grain, which is literally a solid color gray converted to a smart object, and I apply noise and a Gaussian blur. So I apply some noise, some Gaussian blur, and I'll drag that into my designs. I'll cover the whole design, make sure it's a top layer, go to blending mode, overlay, and then I'll put it down to, let's say 30. Let's see how that looks at 30. But you see the difference it already makes? It really gives it that nice little, this is what really gives it that nice HD film look. Let's actually bring this up. Let's bring this up to 50. There you go. That looks good. So I have that film grain look now. And the last thing is the plastic wrapping or the distress look. Depending on your own personal preference, you can use whatever plastic package or plastic wrapping asset you want. A good thing to look up is either plastic texture on Google or even album cover texture. You can look up either or and pretty much find some good ones on here. You could even buy some good ones on packs. But what I'm going to use right now is one that I downloaded. And this one doesn't have those little holes, but it does have a lot of creases. So I'm just going to place that over my image. And I'm basically just going to go through all the blending modes to kind of see which one I like the look of the most. So this linear burn looks good. Let's see. Soft light looks good. I feel like hard light would look good if I just bring down the opacity. Let's try hard light. 10. I think that's good. So I'm with my particular asset, I'm putting it at hard light at 10%, just to add that little tiny, those little tiny effects. Maybe I'll put it down to like 8, make it a little less. So there you have it. Once you've put in the blending mode for the plastic packet, for that plastic overlay, I'm just gonna go back and forth between the designs. The one thing I did do is that I noticed that I didn't like how dark this original transparent was, so I made it a little bit lighter. All I did was I went back to my original transparent Adobe Illustrator file, lighten down the shade. I had it the third grayscale, so I made it the second. I just re-exported it, placed it back, applied the layers, kind of lined it up, and there it is. So thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for watching me pretty much do the walkthrough of this Los Angeles Lakers original graphic, where I redesigned it as Aaron Donald for the Los Angeles Rams. Thank you guys for supporting the video. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe. Please share my videos on social media. Check out my website, jamesccarnib.com, or my social media pages. On Facebook, James C. Carnib, Twitter, James C. Carnib, Instagram, The Creative Guy James. Check out my Behance for my portfolio. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys in the next video.